Hello, everyone. I'm Brent Rains, and this is the first in a series of monthly features with noted author and researcher Dr. Gregory Little. Entitled From Psychology to Indian Mounds, Greg will be sharing with us many details and insights acquired over the years from his in depth and comprehensive research and inquiries into many thought provoking and fascinating subjects. Right now, we'll begin with this question, which should certainly launch us into some very interesting areas of discussion. And so here we go. Greg, how was it that you became so interested in UFOs, mystical experiences, and Indian mounts?
Well, thanks, Brent. It's a pleasure being with you again, and thanks a lot for this. That's a really good question, and I know I've already botched it once. I'm going to tell the listeners I've already made you restart.
That wasn't required.
Yeah, well, because I said I don't know, and I don't know how that happened. I have no idea, but I actually do. It's kind of a long, involved story, but I can make it very brief, and that is. I started in psychology, and it was back in I started undergraduate school in the 60s, the late 60s. But in psychology in the 70s, I was in graduate school and I was training to be in the field of psychopharmacology, which is the study of how drugs work in the brain at both the neurological and the molecular level. So I was really being trained in science. I did a lot of early publications in the field of psychopharmacology in neuroscience journals. And that was in the very early 70s. Somewhere along the line, I got really interested in people who had what they would call mystical or spiritual experiences. And remember, I mentioned the field of psychopharmacology. And obviously, in the 70s, that field was studying the effects of hallucinogenics on people. And people were doing loads and loads of drugs then, hallucinogenic drugs, and they were reporting having life-altering, mind-altering experiences. So that is partly how I got involved in all this. Somehow in it, I became aware of Edgar Cayce. That was probably in the very early 70s. I got extremely interested in Cayce and how he got his psychic abilities. Whether or not they're true is not the issue right now, but Cayce claimed to get his psychic abilities from visitations by an angel, and Cayce actually had 2 visits by an angel, and that changed his life dramatically. Another person had experiences really at the same age Cayce did, ages 12 and 13, with beings that they called angels. They were light beings. All of these experiences involve mystical and unknown lights appearing, and then there are forms that are taken by these beings or these angels. So I was interested in that. It fit the idea of hallucinogenic experiences people were having. There was sort of a matchup with it. As I got deeper and deeper into the spiritual and mystical experiences, I discovered Native Americans had a whole, well, really a whole spiritual culture involving it. And that came actually after I'd already written a lot about UFOs. So, I know you are aware of this. In 1984, I had my first book come out. It was called The Archetype Experience. And The Archetype Experience was a follow-up of Carl Jung's last book, which was called Flying Saucers, A Modern Myth of Things Seen in the Sky, or Skies in the paperback version. And when I did that, I wrote a bit about John Keel, and I noticed that Keel talked quite a bit about Native Americans and mounds in his writing. And I saw other UFO books where they talked about mounds. And at that time, I knew nothing about mounds. And the standard line I always give about this, before I got into the study of Indian mounds, everything I knew about Native Americans and mounds, and I actually, this is not a real exaggeration. Everything I knew about them could have been written on the back of a postage stamp, which I know a lot of our listeners are old enough to know what a postage stamp is. But for those that aren't, it's about a 1-inch square piece of paper. has glue on one side. You put it on an envelope, and it miraculously goes somewhere wherever you put an address on it.
Usually.
Yeah, it's getting a little worse right now for various reasons. But anyway, that's what it is. But I didn't know anything about mounds at the time. And I can recall, and I know you know this, there was an event that occurred after I wrote my first book. And that was, again, the archetype experience. And it was before it came out in 1984. It was probably around 1983 or so when I was waiting for the publisher to do what they do and actually get it released. And it was a series of dreams. There were really two sets of dreams here. One were mine, just mine. And I had these dreams night after night after night. And I've said many times, the best I can recall is it was maybe 10 nights in a row, and it was a recurring dream. And I say 10 nights, and it's a ballpark figure. Maybe it was a week. Maybe it was only 7 nights, but I think it was actually quite a few more than that, and 10's kind of where I settled on. And in that dream, I'd go to sleep, and then I dream that I'm standing on an Indian mound, which I don't even know what it was, really, just a small heap of earth. But I was standing on it, and I was taking photographs with a camera that I didn't even own at the time. I had a good camera in these dreams, and I was taking a picture of a mound. And then suddenly I was on another mound, and I was taking a picture of that mound. Then I was on another mound and taking a picture of that mound, and again and again and again. And it drove me batty for a few nights. And finally, I remember getting up, and it stopped. The last night that I had it was when a movie was on called The White Buffalo. It's a very interesting movie. It's pretty mystical. Of course, it's not factually true. It's about Wild Bill Hickok meeting Crazy Horse, and that didn't happen. But anyway, I realized from these dreams that came from nowhere, that what I wanted to do and needed to do was to make a pictorial history or a pictorial encyclopedia of all the mounds that were still around. Now, I don't know why. I cannot recall why I decided that. I can't recall where it came from. But seeing mound after mound after mound in those dreams and taking pictures of them, I'm sure it came from all that. But I had no idea at the time how big the project would be. I didn't really know how many mounds there were, but that led me into years of almost living in the library, the University of Memphis library, where I was, well, it was Memphis State at the time. Living in there and really absorbing as much as I could from mainstream archaeology books. And of course, I believed almost everything in those mainstream archaeology books, which at the time, Clovis first was dominating, that the first people in the Americas were the Clovis culture. They all came over around 11,000 BC, and they all came from Beringia, and they were the very first. They came from Siberia across the Beringian land bridge, which is between Siberian Asia and Alaska, and then they came down south and populated all of the Americas. That was the theory. I see that today, and I'm even going to start calling it the Clovis cult, because there are still people that believe this. If you were an archaeologist and didn't believe it, you were drummed out of archaeology. And of course, that's exactly what cults do. When you don't believe what their main thesis is, well, they expel you, and they also give you a lot of trouble. So I see that as more of a cult than anything else. But that's kind of how it started. I did not know where it was going to lead. I suddenly then realized that there was a link, a rather deep, important link between Indian mounds and UFO experiences and mystical experiences that people had, and even people like Edgar Cayce and another person, Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc had an experience at age 12 and 13, a series of experiences with entities that were glowing beings that appeared to her, and they gave her secrets and gave her instructions. And there's no doubt Joan of Arc changed the history of France and England. There's no doubt whatsoever. I've really dug into that too. So that's kind of how all this started. Again, I had no idea what I was getting into when I started this. I didn't know there were that many mounds. I thought it would be a project that might last a few years. But there were probably 1 million mounds in the United States alone at one time. Today, there's probably 100, 150,000. So
Wow.
did I answer the first question?
Yes, yes, very, very well. And of course, there's so many things that go into all of this. Uh, and also, you had mentioned ghost hobbies.
Yes. Oh, yes. Well, all right. So that's that. I'm asked all the time about, I work in criminal justice. All right. So I am known mainly in the field of criminal justice. I have my program materials for criminal treatment are in all 50 states. They're in 9 different countries: Australia, New Zealand, England, Canada, Mexico, many others. They're in all the U.S. territories. And so I'm pretty well known in criminal justice treatment and in the field of criminal psychology. I have loads of publications in that field in peer reviewed journals. So I'm fairly well known there. But I'm asked all the time, how in the heck can you be into Indian mounds? How can you be into this Edgar Casey guy and psychics? How in the world can you be into Atlantis and archaeology? And recently I had an interaction with a journalist who was following up on some articles done on us several years ago. And I explained that through the terminology of ghost hobbies. And that term, ghost hobbies, is used in the treatment materials, because what we say in our treatment materials for people trying to change their life for the better is this: that you may have to do something that is not pleasurable or real enjoyable, or something that you just do for money. To exist in the world, people need to have a job, they need to have some sort of income, and it also makes you a better person. If you are employed, Martin Luther King used to talk about this. Work has dignity, so people have to work, and we all do things we don't enjoy. But somewhere in the back of our minds, there are things that we really, really like to do, but they don't necessarily pay anything. I know, for example, that you were into UFOs when you were basically a kid. You were a teenage kid chasing the top UFO people at the time, interacting with them, writing letters, getting letters back, and going and staying at their houses at times. My God, that's amazing. But you didn't get paid for it. That for you was a ghost hobby then. And a ghost
Oh,
hobby is something that's in the background that you're not really paid that much for. It's not your main job, it's not your career, but it's what you love to do. And it can be sports, it might be coin collecting, but it might also be visiting archaeology sites, doing some underwater archaeology just because you're interested in it and you're able to do it. Or maybe it's just visiting mounds and looking at them, or following up on UFO reports. So all of those things are ghost hobbies, and the truth is they make life more enjoyable. They make it fun being here. They're things we look forward to, and they're things to help us get away from some of the problems and other issues that we may have in life. That is what a ghost hobby is.
that's interesting.
People ought to develop their ghost hobbies. The way to think about it is ask yourself, what is something I've always wanted to do, something I've always wanted to try? It might be learning how to play the guitar. I mean, it could be that. It could be singing in a choir. I don't know. It's up to each individual. But for you, I know it was really getting into the UFO field, and think how much you being in the UFO field expanded you as a person. Initially, you were this teenage kid who thought, just like I did when I was younger too and into it, you thought we were probably being visited by aliens and that they were all extraterrestrial craft. And slowly but surely, as you dug into this thing and you enjoyed it more and more and started looking at it, it expanded you as a person. It made you a heck of a lot of friends. It's made you very well known in this field, and because you are so much more reasonable in your approach and kind and gentle in your approach, almost everybody likes you. In fact, I don't know anybody that says a bad word about you. So it's made you a better person. That's what I'm saying. It's expanded you in almost every way. And I know you take your family to some of these things. It's expanded into you into looking in the meaning of life, the meaning of an afterlife. Does an afterlife exist? I mean, that's all part of the quest of your ghost hobby of UFOs, although it's no longer just UFOs.
Oh yeah, I think if it had stayed just UFOs, I probably would have left it a long time ago. But all the other doors that opened, it made it far more interesting, and it just drove me on to want to explore all of these just different mysteries and aspects of life, and about the meaning of life, and all of that. Uh,
That's my big message. These are all supposed to be short sort of vignettes explaining a couple simple things. And my real message to people here is that you've got something in your life that you've always wanted to do. For God's sakes, do it. Do it. Get your feet wet in it, but let it expand. If you happen to be into UFOs and you believe that they're extraterrestrial craft, that's just fine. But allow it to expand a little and take a look at everything. And you will find yourself immersed then in things. I mean, you can't help but be immersed in some archaeology, some mystical stuff, a lot of spiritual events that have occurred. I mean, look at what you did. You've gotten into religious revivals in the 1800s where they saw mystical lights. And your ET people that or the nuts and bolts people would say, well, that doesn't have anything to do with UFOs. But UFOs led you to look into all that stuff. That's my point. So the UFOs and any ghost hobby can get you to expand your life and broaden it and make it deeper and richer. For example, if you want to learn to play the guitar, you may start that and realize, my fingers hurt too much. I can't get used to it. But hey, I might want to play the drums instead. I might want to do this instead, or maybe sing. Just allow yourself to be swept along, but develop a ghost hobby. They're very important. They make life have meaning.
Amen. And I've got a drum over here and some Peruvian whistling vessels. If you
Yes, I know.
anyway,
I'm aware of those. I got some Peruvian vessels too,
yes.
but they're not genuine.
Well, mine ain't either. I mean, they're replicas, but it's
Yes.
still pretty awesome. Well, Greg, thank you very much, and we will have to,
Do it
follow
again.
up with another segment, and continue to explore all of these various threads to all of this.
All right.
Uh,
Well, it's a pleasure. And people,
well,
get a
thank you.
ghost hobby.
Yes,
Yeah.
and as they say on Ghost Hunters, on to the next.
On to the next.